Hi, Miss Stone. Now, for this reading conference, I want to cover two improvements which I noticed within my reading. Those include rereading and understanding the importance of each word, each sentence structure, and each sentence within the text. Now, to begin with rereading, in Brave New World, in my very first reflection for this class, I wrote that I noticed that I had skipped over many important symbols within the text, thinking of them as mere filler. I realized the importance of rereading because without rereading, I would have missed everything. Now, by everything, I'm 90% sure I was referring to the purpose which the author was trying to perpetuate through that one portion of the text. Now, this was me coming in as a fresh reader. I did not reread. I would read each piece, and whatever came out, I would make one centralized claim about the piece. I wouldn't take each portion of the text and slowly build on my assumptions. The next text we reread was Vladimir Nabokov. Now, in his Good Readers essay, he really stressed the importance of rereading. I actually wrote that Nabokov believes that all good readers must reread. Without rereading, they will have many misconceptions about the author's purpose. This was very eye-opening for me as a reader, as I generally just viewed rereading as something done by poor readers, people who wouldn't understand what happens in the first read. But now I realize that rereading is very important. In my reflection for Nabokov, I actually wrote that attempting to read the whole text, I solely looked for a thesis in the beginning of the essay. When I reread it, I was able to find the implicit thesis because I did not look at the whole text at once, rather in small parts. Now, this was a turning point in my reading concerning rereading, because at first when I read Nabokov, I was 100% sure his thesis was explicit, but that's me, just reading the text and not, looking piece by piece and rereading what it is. Now, when I reread it, clearly I could piece together each part of his, explicit comments, his bold comments, and formulate it to a big, centralized, implicit thesis. And both prose, too. She really emphasized rereading for good readers, both Nabokov and prose. Again, in prose, I did write that she believes all good readers will be able to, should be able to reread. She should be able to reread each part of the text and, take it for what it is. Now, in proses, I actually did the same as I did in Nabokov's, where I said that originally I said that in my first read, I thought the thesis was explicit. I read the whole thing, and this was my first read. Now, after rereading it, I clearly realized that it was implicit. Whereas in Nabokov, I needed help from my peers and the class discussion to realize that it's implicit. But with prose, I just reread it by myself, and I realized that it was an implicit thesis. Now, in Beowulf as well, I did not understand a lot of the references. In my reflection for Beowulf that we actually did in our notebooks, not our reading journals, I wrote that the author alludes to Cain and Abel, the Almighty, and God, which at first I did not realize were references to the Bible. Me coming in with the prejudice that Beowulf is a Nordic tale, and that it's purely has to do with Vikings and paganism at the time. I completely missed that reference, and back then, this was again at the beginning, I did not think to reread the text. In Canterbury Tales, in the prologue, I missed a lot of the irony within the prologue, within the characters. In my reflection, I wrote that I'm rereading the text with the class, and when Miss Stone explained the characters, the connections between the individuals and the seven deadly sins became lucid. But on my first read, it was let me read. During my first read, I was not able to make these apparent connections. Now, this clearly shows that, as a reader, I never like to reread, and I would misinterpret the author's purpose. I would miss a lot of the symbolism. Now, going on to the partner's tale, I noticed that in my reflections and my answers, a drastic change. I wrote, this is in my answers, not even in my reflections. I wrote that at first I just viewed the old man as just a man who pointed the people towards goal, the three travelers towards goal. But on my reread, I understood that the old man was a possible candidate for death. Now, this is, I believe, where I realized the importance of rereading, because on my first read, I did not even think of him as anything but just a character to develop the plot. On my reread now, death, that was very symbolic meaning in the partner's tale. So to go on to analyzing each text for what it is, in Beowulf, again in Beowulf and the Canterbury Tales, I don't really have any evidence for Beowulf, but Canterbury Tales I do. I would just find a centralized theme for what the author was saying and the purpose, which was a problem with me just viewing the text as one absolute unit and not taking each individual part for what it is. In the Canterbury Tales, in the prologue, I wrote that after enduring the first read, I am rarely able to make proper assumptions within the author's work. I attempted to understand why the author would use certain dictions and phrases, but I am never able to figure it out. This clearly shows that I had a hard time analyzing each part of the text. This was an evident problem in my reading. Even in a Brave New World, when I wrote that I had skipped over many important symbols within the text, and that I just viewed like the words obliquely, ghost, and winterness as just mere adjectives. I did not think of them as something to relate to the bigger picture. You know, I can always relate the bigger picture to the little picture, but never the little picture to the bigger picture within the text. I can never relate a sentence to the whole centralized meaning and purpose, bigger purpose that the author's trying to project. But I could relate that bigger thesis to the small one. Not really Nabokov, but prose really emphasized analytical reading, which she claims that, which is what I'm doing, which is what I'm improving. She states that all good readers must be able to analyze each portion of the text and relate it to the text as a whole. Nabokov, now prose, she stressed it more than Nabokov, but Nabokov also said that a good reader must be able to relate one portion of the text to another. Now, I wrote that for both, and clearly they're very similar. Now, this is something I really improved on, clearly, from, you know, Brave New World all the way to Partner's Tale, where I was able to relate the old man to death. And yeah, even in the prose, I was able to figure out that the text was an implicit thesis, and that was by me taking each portion of the text and, you know, coming up with a centralized idea that the thesis was implicit. But yeah, thank you.